Good morning. Hope this finds you healthy, happy, and safe. Today's lesson is Chapter 9, Lesson 5, adding unlike fractions. So this is a little different than what we've been doing for the last couple of days. We had adding like fractions before. Today we're doing unlike fractions. What do you think that means? You are saying yes, denominators that are not the same. You are correct. So that's our focus for today. So if you can open up to Chapter 9, Lesson 5, you can pause the video while I go ahead here. And if you can just find your spot, that would be great. Okay, so the question is, what's the relationship between the least common multiple, the LCM, or least common denominator, LCD, that we've been talking about in the last chapter, and adding unlike fractions? Now, in your flip books, you have a section on how to find the least common multiple. So you might want to refer back to that. So it says discussing prior knowledge with students. We have fractions that have different denominators. We know what that means. We've done a few activities with those. And using the least common multiple in order to create those equivalent fractions so that you do have the same denominator. You can't add a fraction with different denominators. So you have to make sure that you're adding apples to apples, if it were, as you were. So we have to make sure we're making that change into common denominators. So to do that, we're going to be looking at this first problem. It says Noah backed up 1/5 of his computer memory. Then he backed up 3/4 of his computer memory. How much of his computer memory has Noah backed up? Follow the steps below. So here are the steps, and you might want to pause the video to write these, at least this one, find the least common denominator. We also call that the least common multiple. So that's where we use either our multiplication charts or listing the multiples of 4 and 5. So the multiples for 4 is 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, and so on. And the multiples for 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and so on. So once you make those lists, remember we're looking for the lowest number that they have in common, and we were listing the multiples. So if you said, oh, I've made my list and it looks like 20 is the least common denominator, you would be right. Because as you go through the 4s and you go through the 5s, you're going to find that 20 is the least common denominator or the least common multiple. So the answer here is 20. Well, we still have to do some work yet because we are looking at fractions up here of 1/5 and we're looking at a fraction of 3/4. Those are not in 20ths right now. You need to change those into 20ths. Well, how do you get from 5 to 20? We know that we multiply by 4. 5 times 4 is 20. If you are multiplying the denominator by 4, you also have to multiply your numerator by 4. So that's why this 4/4 show up. And if you think of 4/4 is equal to 1. So you're not really changing the value because anything times 1 equals itself. You're not changing the value. You're creating an equivalent fraction. Remember, we talked about equal value. So 1/5 times 4/4 is 4/20. So you multiply straight across. 1 times 4 is 4, and 5 times 4 is 20. And you do that same thing over here with 3/4. But in this case, you're multiplying by 5/5. Why? Because 4 times 5 is 20. So you have to change your thinking here. 5 times 4 is 20. 4 times 5 is 20. So that's why you're multiplying by 5/5. Now you have what's called a like fraction. They have a common denominator. Their denominators are alike. This is in 20ths. This one is in 20ths. You have 4/15ths, or I'm sorry, 4/20ths plus 15/20ths. Add your numerators. That's what we were doing in the last couple of lessons. So 4 plus 15 is 19. Your answer is 19/20ths. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. and get to the math in my world. Example 1. In the morning, an octopus swam for 1/3 hour. In the afternoon, the octopus swam for 1/4 hour. For how much of 1 hour did the octopus swim altogether? So we've got 1/3 and 1/4. Notice that they have a 3 as a denominator and a 4. They are not the same number. So you have to have find the least common denominator or their least common multiple. As you make your lists of 3s or 4s, or you look down your multiplication charts, the list of 3s are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, counting by 3s. Same with the 4s, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on. The least common denominator for 3 and for 4 is 12. And if you don't believe me, look down your multiplication charts for 3 and 4. You will see that the first number that they have in both columns that's the same is 12. In this section here, you notice that they're taking 1/3 times 4/4. Why are they doing that? Well, 3 times 4 is 12. And over here, they're doing 4 times 3 for the other fraction because 4 times 3 is 12. Notice that they're multiplying both the numerator and denominator by the same number and creating this newly a fraction called it the equivalent fraction. It has equal value. Why? Because you're multiplying by 1. Anything times 1 equals itself. So you're not changing the value of it, you're just changing the looks of it, if you will. So we've got 1/3, which is equal to 4/12. We have 1/4, which is equal to 3/12. Again, we just add our numerators. 4 plus 3, everybody knows that's 7, at least in 5th grade anyway. So 4 plus 3 is 7, denominator stayed the same. Notice we didn't add your denominators, you never do that. You never add your denominators together, it just stays at 12. So 1/3 plus 1/4 is equal to 7/12, and the octopus swam for 7/12 hour altogether. You could also model it out. Now, chapter 9, lesson 4 had modeling. We didn't have tiles at home, but if we did, or if you created your own, this is how you would model it out. So that's one way to double check. And if you remember when we were in class, we would have Mrs. Amons in the back of the room double checking those things, and she would move around those tiles. Unfortunately, she's not with us, so we're just going to have to do it ourselves or take a peek here and look at that. Example 2, Catalina spent 1/5 of her free time reading and 7/10 of her free time practicing her flute. What fraction of her free time did she spend reading and practicing her flute? So we're looking for her altogether time again. So we're adding. Notice there's a 5 and a 10, different denominators, so we can't add those yet. They have to be the same. You can do some estimation if you want. 5 does go into 10 evenly twice. So if you are looking at 5 and 10 on your multiplication chart, you will see that the first number that they have in common is the 10. 10 times 1 is 10. So they didn't do anything with that. You didn't have to do anything with that fraction. 7/10 just stays 7/10. Notice it stayed 7/10 down here. But 1/5 had to be turned into tenths. To do that, 5 times 2 is 10. And 1 times 2, you all know, is 2. So now we have 2/10 plus 7/10. We're adding our numerators here. 2 plus 7 is equal to 9. So we end up with an answer of 9/10. And again, it says Catalina spent 9/10 of her free time reading and practicing her flute. And then the check in this case, if you were using estimation, and that goes back to chapter 9, lesson 1, when you were rounding to the nearest 0, 1/2, or 1, and then doing that check. So whichever is easiest for you, if you want to use tiles or you want to do a check by estimation, either one is fine. So guided practice. We have a 5 and a 2, and I'm going to try to write here, so stick with me. We have 5 and 2. So as you think about your, let me see if I can do a text here. As you think about your list for 5s and 2s, we know that 2s, well, let me type on there, sorry. I'll have to write it. If we start listing the 2s, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and it keeps on going. But I'm going to stop there because I already know that the answer for my least common multiple is 10, but I want to show it to you. so that you can do the same list if you want to. So we have 5, 10. They are in common. It's the smallest number that they have in common. That's what least common denominator is all about. So if you want to pause the video and just write that stuff down, you can go ahead. And then you could do the same thing for 4 and 8. We start listing the 4s. We know that 4 and 8. Oh, when we start listing for 8, look at there. We already have an answer, 8 and 8. So we're not going to have to do anything with this 1/8 on that problem because we know that 8 is the common denominator, so we don't have to do anything with that. So how do you get, let me erase this, and if you need to pause this before I erase it, go ahead and pause it and write down what I have here. Get this erased because I want to have some room here. Turn that off. Okay, so we're changing 2/5. Ooh, that's really big. That's a lot of fun. It's just like being in school, isn't it? So we have 2/5, and we want to turn that into tenths. So what are we multiplying by here? What are we multiplying to get to tenths? If you said 2, you are absolutely right. We are multiplying by 2. 5 times 2 is 10, so then we need to do 2 times 2, which is 4. So we have 4 tenths. Plus, we have to change this 1/2 into tenths. Ooh, how are we going to get to tenths? How do you get from 2 to 10? What are you multiplying by? If you said 5, you are absolutely right. We are multiplying by 5. And 1 times 5 is 5. So we end up with 4 tenths plus 5 tenths. What does that equal to? And I'm going to leave that there for a second and let you finish that one out. 3/4 we have to change into eighths. How do you get from fourths to eighths? What are you multiplying by? If you said 2, you are absolutely right. 3 times 2 is 6. So 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. We're going to add 1/8 to that. I'll hit equals here. And if you need to copy all that down, go ahead because I'm going to erase that. So take a minute to pause this if you need to. So as we look at the answer here, that'll come up. We see that you should have gotten 9 tenths and 7/8. If you didn't, I want you to go back and double check, rewind the video and see what in the world did you do that you didn't get 9 tenths and 7/8. Did you accidentally add your denominators? Did you forget to change your numerator when you were doing the equivalent fraction? So take a peek at your work and just see if you can figure that out. Your assignment is the independent practice pages, front and back, and you can take a picture of that, email it to me, or you can open up a Google Doc, share that document with me, and write your answers in there. That's fine either way. Whatever you like to do. Maybe take a picture of yourself. I haven't seen you guys in a while, so whatever works for you sounds good to me. Until next time, stay safe.